Good evening. Wasn't that an incredible piece of filmmaking? And also an incredible story. And I know nobody who's better at telling the story of survivors than the director of this film and an old friend. Please help me welcome to the stage, Amy Berg. We've met before. Another legend, please, Mr. Bill Simmons, one of the producers of the film. And the incredible Michael Tighe. Please let's welcome him back. Michael, I want to start with you because I feel like the thing that Jeff had, and I think you've got this too, but for me, it's the soul of a real artist is that they can pull you into whatever emotional state they're feeling at the time. And when did you recognize that power in him?
I think, is this on? Yeah. I think the first time I really felt that he had something that was legendary in that way, as far as like how he wouldn't really perform a song, he would emote a song more than perform it. And I really felt that for the first time at Shanae when he did Hallelujah. Like I'd seen him do a few other, covers before. At that time at Shanae, he wasn't really doing a lot of original material, mostly just covers. And I thought he sounded amazing and everything, but something just flicked in me, like when I heard him sing Hallelujah, and I felt like I was next to a legend.
Because he could change the temperature of a room, and struck me like almost like a cabaret performer, except he would start the singing, you go, wait, where did that come from? Because it was so easy the way he would talk to the audience, and then suddenly he's like, what?
Yeah, like he was possessed, yeah.
And Bill, let me put this to you, because I feel like what you recognize in him is certainly, for a long time he was kind of the music equivalent of the Detroit Lions. He wasn't recognized in the way that he should have been. That first album didn't get the reviews it should have got. I remember having an argument with a friend of mine who reviewed it, because I thought when you hear Grace, to me it's like hearing Nina Simone singing Fool in the Rain. It's a magical kind of transportive thing, isn't it?
Well, I'm Gen X, and we had so much good music there from that basically 90 through 96. But he stood out in his own way, and it was interesting. Everybody had a different favorite song of his. Like, I always thought Last Goodbye was one of the best songs of the 90s, just period. And it was like this was the mixtape era where you're making somebody you like or you're about to break up with. You'd put different songs on. And Last Goodbye was always like a good closer for that. Like, all right, I guess we'll see each other later. This is Last Goodbye. But there was just nobody like him. And I think, I'm obviously from the sports side. When you have these athletes, when their careers get cut short, or you see actors, people like Heath Ledger, or somebody like Jeff, or
Chris Cornell, or so many people he surrounded by.
Especially from the 90s, we had so many of those. But I think what was so fascinating about him as the years passed was how good that album was, but also the potential of what could be next. And we just never found out. And, then you hit the Spotify era, and people can make the mixtapes and that now they're playlists, and these little songs can take a whole different meaning, which Amy and I were just talking about. Like in 2025, he's hitting with this completely different generation for different ways.
Well, part of it too, and the reason I brought up Fool in the Rain, because I'm going to bring this back to you a little bit, Michael, that you hear the way that Matt is playing the floor toms during the chorus, and you go, oh my God. It's this mating of drummer and lead singer that you didn't hear very often in that era. Usually it was a drummer like taking it someplace else, but it was the way, for me, Bonham and Plant connected.
Yeah, exactly. They had that same kind of chemistry. A very different spin on it, and more jazzy to a degree, because Matt's background is quite jazz.
But when the
synergy that they had and the way they communicated was unbelievable.
It really was. And Amy, I mentioned survivors as I was bringing you up because you do these stories about the way that families connect. And early in the film, his mother talks about they raised each other. But there's a moment in this film that's one of my favorite of yours when she's smoking weed in a parking lot. He has to go out and be the parent. You go, oh, you can see so many different colorations in that moment. And it's such a beautiful scene.
Yeah, I mean, Mary was 16 when she got pregnant, and she had dreams of her own, as we say in the film. So they definitely kind of raised each other, and Jeff had to take on so much responsibility, and it kind of surprised me that he became such an incredible artist. If you think about the environment where he came from, I grew up in Los Angeles, and like Anaheim had it had a certain reputation back then, and Orange County, and then to see Jeff in his interviews talking about India and women's rights and equality. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. I mean, he was just so well-read and so otherworldly, and so it just was so unusual for me to dig into him and see who he became and where he came from.
I mean, I think for me, there's a moment in this film that sort of tells you everything that happened to this guy. And you see his father's phone number written on the matchbook that he got from his father after seeing him and spending time with him for the first time. And he dies almost shortly after that. I mean, if that's not a movie in that moment, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and it took me a long time to get the permission to make the film. So it took me 10 years, actually.
When did you first seize on this? What made you want to do this?
Well, Deliver Us from Evil, my first film, we used Hallelujah at the end of Deliver Us from Evil, and I couldn't get the rights to it, but that was my favorite version of it. I love the version that we ended up using, but I got the idea then, and so I started reaching out to Mary shortly after that, excuse me, and she said no. Then I made another film, and I went back to her again, and she kept saying no, but she gave me this little thumb drive at one point because she wanted me to do the scripted film. And I heard those voicemails, and I was like, Mary, come on, this is a documentary. Like, those voicemails were there wasn't a lot in the archive. It might look like there was a lot in the archive, but it was a really tiny archive. But there were just these elements that were so magical and so they just told me so much about Jeff, so I just kind of hung in there. But just to get back to one of the thing about his father that you were mentioning, one of the most important parts of the story for me was that this was a person who came from this man. He had his name, and he looked similar, and he inherited a lot of his talent, and he never knew him. So he spent his whole career being introduced as someone's son, and what does that mean? So for me, that was like always a very important part of the story. But then getting to know what his complicated relationship was like with his mother, it just made it so much richer.
To me, that's what the story's about. The story's about his mother as much as anything. Again, you make these movies about survivors, and people who survive these enormous body blows. And her just talking about being repudiated by her family at a point where mores were shifting and there was more acceptance of moms who were raising kids by themselves, but still her parents fought her, and then to have been rejected by the father before the baby is born. I mean, that to me, I'm sorry, it's hard to talk about that because the story about the way they clung to each other is so powerful.
Right, and then when I found that footage of Tim just being an activist and fighting for, other folks' rights, it was just like it's the typical story.
It's the Woody Guthrie story, I mean, it's so many of those different stories, isn't it? Mike, I want to ask you too, because the way you write and the way that Jeff did, you both sort of strike me as being these guys who do almost these emotional journal entries. They're like, does that make sense? And I just feel it's a kind of immediate simpatico between the two of you as sort of writers. I mean, and that it really existed, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. We kind of both discovered Dylan at the same time, and I think that really bonded us as far as like lyrics go and writing. He was house sitting for someone in the West Village, and she had all of Dylan's albums, and I had heard him a bit, my parents played him growing up, but like he oddly didn't know much Dylan at all, and we kind of discovered him together, and the emphasis on the lyrics just, blew our minds, and we just, we would talk about them all the time and, try to emulate it as much as possible. He also was a huge Morrissey fan. He turned me on to Morrissey.
You can sort of hear that in the way
Yeah.
they get. I mean, it's funny because there's a great guitarist in that band, but it's also that incredible drummer. In the same way there
Such
was in
an
the Smiths.
amazing, interesting band, yeah.
And I actually got to see the Smiths live a couple of times, and then seeing Jeff Buckley. You go, oh my God, it's that. But I mean, the way he could change colorations on lines in a chorus. I mean, and again, the chorus of Grace, he goes from doing Robert Plant to Nina Simone. The breathing, it's just extraordinary.
Yeah.
Let me
I
ask you.
think also just to just point out that not only was it that emotional poetry kind of connection, but also Michael, maybe you could tell them the story about how Jeff heard the riff of So Real, like when you were in high school in your bedroom, and how that.
Oh, yeah, I was, So Real was one of the first things I had written as far as like a guitar composition, and I was still in high school, and he came over. Actually, he was already at my house playing with my brother, and I came home from school, and he, I was very new at guitar, even though I was, I didn't know a lot of like rudimentary stuff with guitar, the basics, but I was making these compositions, and he said, "Well, let me hear you play some guitar," and I played him pretty much, So Real in its entirety. And yeah, and he was pretty blown away by it, and
Yeah.
and but then he didn't really talk about it for a couple of years, and then after I joined the band in a rehearsal, he said, "Remember that song you played me on your bed that day a couple of years ago? Play it for me." And he got behind the drums and started, playing that drum beat and started singing the chorus. Yeah.
I mean, God, we could talk about that song all night because it's one of these things that every time he played it, it sounded different.
Yeah.
And we hear that in the way that you use Hallelujah, and the performance is different because you could hear the breathing so different. You could hear when he was breathing like Judy Garland, and then he would get really big at the high end of the scale, and then he's doing Robert Plant, and he'd hold into the middle of it. And did you know he'd be able to like bring so much out of that song, so many different
No,
versions?
I mean, when I first heard that chorus, I almost fainted. It was, I didn't even know what he was singing. It almost sounded like Hank Williams to me or something with the yodel, it's like, but I mean, after we recorded that, my life totally changed.
That's kind of a Morrissey yodel too. I mean, that's sort of going up
Yeah.
as soon as now.
Actually, I just talked to someone who says Johnny Marr is a big fan of So Real, which totally made my
That's in the
decade.
world. But I mean, Bill, one of the things I think would attract you to this is that you are attracted as a writer to outsized personalities, really bigger than life people who sometimes there's kind of a disconnect between their emotional maturity and their ability to achieve. And I wonder if that was part of this for you with him.
I mean, Amy and I almost worked together, 7 years ago? She was almost in the original series of Music Box, and How It Fell Apart is almost its own podcast.
I'm sure you'll do it sometime,
it
but
was
okay.
one of the first ones we tried to do, and it's an amazing story, and it fell through. But I always wanted to work with her because
Which story was it, can you say?
it was about the Red Hot Chili Peppers and the Californication album, and it's like an hour-long podcast. But so we never got to work together, and then I remember when we were doing the what we thought was gonna be the Red Hot Chili Peppers, she was talking about her dream thing was Jeff Buckley. And she was like, I don't know if I have to convince his mother, and I don't know if she's ever going to want to give the content out. And so we found about this pretty late. We needed one extra thing for Music Box, and she was way down the road with it. I just couldn't believe that she did it, but I was so excited about it because I've worked with a lot of directors on these things. Amy's like the perfect person to do a documentary with because she just, you want to be with the people that give the most shits as they're working on something. She's all in. She's not like one of those, I'm doing 5 things, I got to pass this off. She's not doing something because it's commercial. She's really doing it because she really, really, really cares about whatever she's doing. So this was like, I mean, the Buckley, just this doc going to her, I think was just perfect.
Well, the thing about Amy is that she's as obsessed as the characters in her pieces. They all have kind of an obsession, and that's you, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, if you had ever gotten into true crime, you probably would have made like $1 billion. Just then, you would have had like
seriously.
7 series at this point.
Yeah, no, but I mean, the work isn't as good when you're so spread out. And I, I've had times in my life where 2 films like collided at once. And that was like so painful for me because then I just can't sleep at all because I'm always thinking about it. But this was just the dream project on every level for me. So, I mean, I feel like even when I look at my career, I think like this film, the idea of this film kept me going. Like there's a big connection with this film in west of Memphis. Because obviously I was down there all the time, but also that's where I met Ben Harper, and that's where I got a lot of the stories about Jeff. And I couldn't have made this movie in 2008 when I was making, or 2009 when I was making West Memphis. This movie had to happen right now because it is like a commercial success because it's right now, because this was the film that was able to reach Gen Z, and that's like, it's so amazing that you see parents and their children going to this movie. Like it's so beautiful. It's like this bond. So we had the timing just worked out. We didn't even spend a lot of money on the movie. It all happened on social media, on TikTok. That was exactly how people like left their house to go see this movie in the movie theaters. So
yeah, sometimes things are meant to be. And for whatever reason, he's having a moment. It felt like, I remember, what was that? There was an OC season in the mid-2000s, and they used Hallelujah.
Yes.
And he started to have like a moment again. And then it happened in 2010s, and I remember my daughter in like 6th, 7th grade being like, who's this Jeff Buckley? But now it feels like, it's 30 years later, and it feels like his stuff is as relevant as it's been. And the weird thing about music is sometimes the people just fade away, and then other times they resonate like they did when they hit 30 years earlier, and I think he's one of those people.
yeah, I mean, he has more followers than Bob Dylan on TikTok. It's
and
crazy.
he's hitting more now, even. Yeah.
It's funny, my daughter explained it to me as, because we were talking about the
How's
show.
your daughter now?
She's 20. This show, Summer I Turned Pretty, on Amazon, and everybody loves this guy Conrad. And I was like, so why do they like this guy Conrad? And she's like, because he courts, he yearns. And boys and men don't yearn, and they don't want to court anymore. And she's like, that's why people love Jeff Buckley, because you can feel the yearning in the songs. And I was like, wow, you're just smarter than I am now, I guess. Apparently.
No, I mean that's the connection between Judy Garland and Nina Simone,
Right.
and Morrissey. All these people who, and Robert Plant, all people who basically are these live wires, these antennae who connect with audiences in fundamental ways, but it doesn't matter what their singing style is, they have their hearts on their sleeve.
But that like romanticism and that yearning was not popular when we were doing it, This was before Coldplay, It was
Oh no! People's idea of yearning was Pearl Jam. That was yearning, and it was in its way. But I mean, for that album cover, and I'm glad that you focus on it in the film because it was a revolutionary cover. Is he straight? Is he making fun of cocktail singers? What is he doing with this? And for me, it's just that he's this real American synthesis. He's R&B. He's old school pop. He's learning Al Di Meola licks. I mean, the virtuosity that takes and the concentration that it takes to be able to play that way and to sing on top of it. I mean, it's your daughter's right about that quality of just, I mean, it's something Byronic about him. And that's why Frankenstein, I think, is a big thing now, too, because that same kind of sense of romanticism and doom. I mean, because I have a friend who's this film critic, Pauline Kael, who I sent her the CD, and she goes, this guy sounds like he's singing from The Grave, which is his first record. You go, wow. And there's that sort of thing that's kind of timeless and not of the moment at the same time. Isn't there, Mike?
Yeah. No, you totally nailed it, yeah.
No, because I want to ask you, too, because there's so many moments in this we realize that again, you deal with survivors so often, and so often in your films, there's something that's happened to somebody and they haven't quite outgrown that moment. Again, that moment where he loses kind of his dad before his dad dies. I mean, just seeing his father's phone number on the matchbook. You talk about Hank Williams. I mean, that's just completely heartbreaking.
Yeah, just, I mean, and just the struggle that he publicly had to work through for his entire life. I, yeah, I felt for him. I know that he told a lot of people he didn't think he would outlive his father. And I know that was a big moment when he turned 28. It was, it was kind of like crossing over for him, but he just couldn't shake it because he was so critical of himself and like his isms. And I think that it just is so sad that he was so spontaneous in that moment, because I think like we were talking in the green room earlier about how some people they use their art to, to communicate whatever they're carrying around. But Jeff was actually trying to do it in real life too. He was actually he was using his art. He was writing from his soul, and he also wanted to get better. He thought that, he had things that weren't exactly right, and he wanted to get therapy. He wanted to get better. So it's just like, that's...
Yeah, and like you were saying, I can't remember who you said he sounds like he's singing from the grave. Who was it?
Pauline Kael, who
Oh,
wrote
yeah. But, I think probably you feel very connected. I mean, and I feel this now, having lost him, you feel very connected to death and the grave. I mean, he lost his father when he was 8. So that kind of puts you in that realm, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that certain times that certain traumas happen, and that's where part of you sort of seizes up. And there's so much of him that's still like a boy that you sort of, that awful sense of drama. I mean, that theater of seeing him on that scaffold above that show. And it's, you think how many times that he sort of like evade death in moments like that, but that's something a kid would do, and the kid would wander into that lake in their clothes and in their heavy shoes.
Right, and you mentioned Chris Cornell earlier, and I've been doing some research because I'm working on a project about him as well right now, and I was finding some similar traits, and I think that it might also have something to do with ADHD and creativity. It's just like a lack of impulse control, and I think like that, that is something hopefully he would have outgrown. I think Chris did outgrow part of that, but there were a lot of stories like that. Gene Bowen, his manager, told me about a girl handing him some roses after a performance, and he just took a bite of the roses, this looks beautiful, I'm gonna try it. And
Well, that's something a boy
like
would do.
child, exactly.
I have to ask you as the last question here, because we can go to the reception. What his mother said when she saw the film and that last moment of communion that they have.
She really likes the film. I mean, it was beautiful. She came over to my house and they watched it, and her and her niece, and it was like, no, she was very happy. She said I was the right person to tell the story. So it was incredible. I mean, really incredible, because she was a flawed mother, as she said, and she let me show her warts, and so it was a beautiful, like, cathartic moment.
It's a beautiful, cathartic film. Let's thank these guys for being here tonight.